Hey everyone, welcome to Creating the Comic Addendum Edition. This week we dive deeper into episode 3 on editing with an interview with Alice Ernest. She provides some great information both for creators who are looking for an editor, but also for creators who are thinking about getting into editing themselves. There's a lot of great stuff, so without further ado, let's get right to it. Hey everyone, I'm here with Alice Ernest. She's an editor and she's going to help kind of talk about the process of editing. Alice, how are you?
Fabulous. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah. And so thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I guess, first thing I always ask anybody creative in comics is, what was your kind of origin story just when it comes to comics for you? How did you get into liking them? I guess we'll start with kind of if and how you got into kind of liking comics as a medium, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it as a profession.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I've always been a big reader. And when I was a kid and my mom went to college, she would drop me off at Barnes and Noble for babysitting. So I would just dive right to the manga section, and I devoured their entire manga rack, and they let me order books that I didn't pay for and read them right there in the store. It was really great. And yeah, so it was really like, manga that kind of got me started. And then, I got into like actual comic books at this used bookstore when I was in college. And just, I was reading a lot of Garth Ennis. He's my favorite. Okay. And, things like that. I'm not really big on superheroes, but I really started getting into like more independent comics and smaller presses. Like Oni Press is really good. That's where Scott Pilgrim came from. And so and then in college I majored in creative writing first, and then I switched to art. And somewhere in the middle I was like, let's do a comic book publishing club. And so I started M Theory Comics at my university. Okay. And we just published sort of more like zines, really, that we printed using the school printers, and it was cool. And then I had a internship at a writer's retreat center, and just kept editing for friends and went from there.
Yeah, it's an interesting path, like going from creative writing to art, like that makes perfect sense for kind of making that kind of transition over to comics. And you brought up an interesting thing. I never thought about it, but it's maybe it's a generational thing about Barnes and Noble kind of being almost like a
library.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like there is this excitement that I get that I don't know that maybe younger generations get going to Barnes and Noble. Like even now, if I have a chance, I could just wander around Barnes and Noble. It's such it's interesting. And I've never thought about it as that, but it is this kind of just fun place to go to that I'm always weirdly like drawn to.
It's been a while since I've been to one. But yeah, I mean, they have a cafe in there. Like, you can't fail. Coffee and books.
Yeah, exactly. So now, so editing professionally, is that something that just kind of started with you editing for friends and then building on that? Or how did you kind of get into kind of being a professional editor?
Yeah, so it was primarily with friends, just kind of working at it. And it was really a lot of dabbling for years. I've had a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs. Like I had a construction business for a while. Like I've done a lot of different things, and it was just always sort of there on the side. If a friend needed help with story, because I am primarily a developmental editor and project manager. So the art classes obviously also help with art direction and things like that, but my first love is story. So I'd have friends coming to me for brainstorming sessions, like, I'm really stuck in this scene, how can I, or sort of coaching to get through creative ruts. And then the pandemic happened, and I couldn't build custom furniture anymore, so I was stuck at home, and I was like, let's see if I can turn the editing into a more full-time thing. So, for years it was not a primary source of income, and then it did become my primary source in the pandemic. And it went that way for a lot of people, actually. You know, it was an interesting time because a lot of people were coming into editing full time, you know, whether they were leaving more corporate jobs or, um, you know, just trying to figure out how to make it working from home. But there were also a lot of writers at that time. You know, people had time to write, and it was sort of a cool thing to have more editors and more writers at the same time. And
Yeah.
it's not really that way anymore. You know, there aren't
Yeah.
as many writers, but there's still more and more people who want to do freelancing and working from home. So we
Yeah.
still have more editors coming
Yeah.
in.
Well, that's a good point. I think I even like I during the pandemic, I was fortunate that the company I worked for was shut down, but they paid us for a decent amount of it. And then when they finally furloughed everybody, I was able to get a job quickly. So but that was the free time I had was when I actually started to think, maybe I could start writing. And so that allowed me the time that I didn't have pre-pandemic, to actually think about writing, and then actually do it, which I don't
Mm.
know that would have happened. I'd had ideas and wanted to get into to doing something, but I think that allowed me the time to actually develop a story. And then once it was developed and things started to get back to normal, it was like, well, I've got this thing here now, I got to actually go through the process of getting it out there.
Mm.
So now you mentioned, so I guess when it comes to editing, obviously like editing is done on all levels, fiction, nonfiction, journals, everything. My stepson actually, he's moved up, but he started as an editor for a medical journal, and then he then went into proofreading. So it's like you've got this at all levels, of anything almost anything creative. Now, what makes, I guess, comic editing different from editing for a novel or editing for a journal? Like what makes comics unique?
Well, first let's talk about how they're similar, right? Because there
Sure.
are, you know, different levels of editing that you would go through, right?
Yeah.
First, obviously, would be developmental editing, maybe some beta readers. And I guess the difference there between editing something like a comic and a novel is the editor also needs to look at what the comic is going to look like before there is art, right?
Yeah.
So it's similar in that you're looking at the story and how the story flows, but you're also, you know, looking at the directions written for the artist and how many panels are on the page, and looking at things like how many words are on the page. You know, you don't want to have a manuscript page in a comic. You know, the word count is going to be different, and so you're looking with more elements, right? You need to make sure that you know, you're looking for things like, okay, is this person asking the artist to draw two different gestures on the same character in the same panel? Because that won't work.
Yeah.
You know, and there are these sort of common errors that you would find, you know, like too many words, like too much telling and not enough just drawing it, you know. Just sometimes you do have to, you know, come right out and say, well, since I'm your sister, I know that you're, you know, that these kinds of things, to, you know, the rules are a little bit different between a comic and a novel with those kinds of stating the obvious things, right? Because you don't have a narrator. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you have to approach it as well with the developmental editing. And then it goes a bit more into art direction when you bring on the artist, and that there's also a bit of project management in it, because you might have to find the artist, you might have to find the other kinds of editors to do the different levels, the inkers, the colorists, all of these different things, because as you know, there's a million different hands on the comic. You know, it's not it's not that common actually to find someone who's writing the story and doing the art. Right. It is a very collaborative thing. It's almost like a movie in a way, because there's so many different people working on it. So that's really kind of where the split off happens. Like once you have everything in writing solid and you bring on the artist, the levels of editing really kind of change, right? So you've got the art direction and more project management things, making sure that things are getting in on time, making sure that the art is clear and showing what you need it to show the reader, and that everything makes sense. And sort of also the framing of things, like, oh, this character looks like he's on the left in this frame, but now he's on the right in this frame, and that's confusing. Things like that. And yeah, and you just kind of have to make sure that they get things in on time. That's also a challenge sometimes. And yeah, just making sure that they're nice to work with. Sometimes you might have to do quality control as well, make sure, I mean, I think everyone's heard some of the big dramas with different people introducing things to the comic that like flew past everyone's attention, that are racist or sexist or otherwise problematic. So yeah, there's a bit of that goes into it as well, to make sure that, since it is such a collaborative thing, it's not, one person's bad behavior isn't looking bad for everybody.
Yeah. So now beyond the developmental editing, what are the other levels of editing in the process? And then I guess the secondary question is typically, and maybe you can tell me for you, and then just how it is in the industry. Will you have one editor that can kind of do all the different kinds of editing, or are you typically then outsourcing, the other steps in the level to other people?
So it kind of depends a bit. I almost always would prefer to have more than one person doing the editing, because if you have someone working on story, they might introduce errors, like, oh, I put a comma here when it wasn't necessary, and those become blind spots, right? Because you've already gotten too close to it in this one way of editing. So the more eyes you can get on it to make sure that it's going well, the better, in my opinion. So for some writers, they don't really feel they have the budget for that, so they might skip levels. It's not unheard of for an indie comic to forego the developmental editing or even the copy editing or proofreading, and that's.
So now, I guess you mentioned prior to talking kind of the difference between proofreading and copy editing. And so what is that? If you can explain what the difference is between those, and why maybe it's important to have somebody for each of those.
Yeah. So when people think proofreading, they're thinking probably what they did in school. Like, everybody called it proofreading, but that's actually copy editing. Copy editing is fixing grammar, spelling, punctuation mistakes. There's also sort of between developmental editing and copy editing, there's also line editing, which is just sort of working with the rhythm and music of the words and making sure that it flows really well. Because developmental editors are sort of bull in a china shop. We'll go in there and say, oh, here's a big plot hole, here's how you fix it, and it's not really going to sound pretty all the time. So, it might fix the high level problems, but as you get to finer and finer details, you want to make sure that it's smoother. So you get someone in to make it pretty again, and then you get someone to come in after the line editor, the copy editor, to say, okay, well, we missed a comma here. We need to, this word isn't quite the connotation that you want. We'll change that. And fixing spelling, all those things. And then, they'll work before the letterer comes in, right? Because the letterer is going to put everything in and make it nice. And that would be sort of the formatting step of the novel editing in a way, because you'd be, picking your font and aligning the margins and things like that. And that's the formatting, or the letterer, right? And then at that stage, after that's done, it looks complete, but you still need someone to go back through and say, oh, you accidentally hit enter here. And we need to make these lines together so that it fits properly in the bubble, right? Or different things like that.
And that's the proofreader.
That's the proofreader.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, proofreader is the very, very end. Like, everybody thinks that it's like, oh, I've written my first draft, now I need a proofread.
Yeah.
No, it's after the formatter, after the letterer. Yeah.
Got it. So that's all done, and then that goes to the proofreader once once you have it on paper.
Once you have a book that looks complete, you're like, okay, make sure that it's actually complete and there aren't any mistakes that everybody else missed.
Yeah. And I guess in the world of where so many are done kind of digitally, it makes it quite a bit easier to correct now than if it's done with, pen to paper. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends because there are different softwares,
Fair enough.
right?
Yeah.
So, you'd have to know how to use the software,
Yeah. No, well, I
which
guess, or
I don't know how to do it.
yeah. Well, I was
But
thinking
yeah.
about you sending it back to whoever did it. So more like if you catch something, that goes right back to the letter to fix it.
I don't do proofreading.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
That's is I developmental. I'm pulling a
Yeah.
sandwich shop. Can't be trusted with the fine details.
Fair enough.
So I might notice something, but I don't know. In novels, it would be Acrobat. It would be probably Illustrator usually for
Yeah.
comics. So it's going to be someone going in there to who knows how to move this stuff.
Yeah.
Usually they'll just make the changes themselves rather than sending it back to the letterer.
Okay. Oh,
But
I see. Okay.
it will be approved, obviously. But
Got it. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
makes sense. So now I guess the challenge, like when it comes to indie comics, is a lot, in a lot of situations, like where, it's like this, it's self-funded, or the goal is to go through a crowdfunding, which even a crowdfunding campaign that makes, 30,000, a lot of that money is going to go right back to the book. So how, I guess first thing is I guess we'll get a little bit more towards like the different different types of editing and how to find the right person. But if somebody's limited with budget, what would you say is the most important level of editing to go with? Or if you even like ranked it, like what's the most important person to go to if you're an indie comic developer who wants who's limited with what you can spend on this stuff?
So I think the problem is if you're making comics, it's a passion project.
Yeah.
And anyone you bring on is going to be way less passionate about it than you. That's just the bottom line. So the more you pay them, the more passionate they'll be, right? So if you get someone for a low price, they may not do a good job.
Yeah.
Because if they're competing with price, they're not competing with quality.
Yeah.
So I think it is a really difficult thing because it is a passion project. And it's I think that the problem is with editing, it looks expensive to the person hiring.
Yeah.
Because all they see is, okay, you've done this project and it took you this amount of time, and so that's the billable hours, right? But as a freelancer, you also have to think about all the time that you're spending advertising, talking to clients who don't hire you, all these other things, and make sure that your expenses get paid, because you're not working a 9-to-5 job. You're working 1 week out of a month. That's just the reality, and that's why these things are expensive, because if this is your editor's only income, they have to make all of their income from your comic. And that means, so if someone's getting lots and lots of jobs because they're only charging $10 a page, like that, they don't have time to do a good job because they've got 100 other contracts. It's just, the balance is really a difficult thing to strike. I think, I think when people think money first, there might be a different way to go about it. I think crowdfunding is really great because you kind of can test it before you spend money on a thing. You can do a proof of concept, say, hey, this is a thing that I'm passionate about that I want to create, and this is kind of what I think it'll look like. These are the kind of people I want to hire and how much it'll cost to do it. This is how much it's going to cost to do this comic. Is it interesting to people? Do they want to do it? And you approach it as a business venture, and you're saying, okay, is there actually market interest in this product? And if people pay you to make the product, go find an editor who is worth the money that you're going to spend on them. Because if you're thinking money first and you're trying to hire the cheapest person, they're not going to give you a quality product. So my advice is, I guess, a little bit not what you want. You want.
No, that's fair.
But it's like, if you, I think you really need to think about, the marketing and who it's for. If you're just publishing a thing that you're going to show to your friends, like, you might not even need an editor. Just, print it on your computer at home, and
Yeah.
make something, cool, and build from there, build a community around that, meet friends to collaborate with, and that can be kind of cool. But when you're thinking about doing a serious publishing project, every step of the way is going to cost money. And quality printing is really expensive. You have to print a
Yeah.
lot. You have to work with a bunch of different people who are going to want to get paid, or they're not going to give you quality work. So
Well, you
get the
bring up
money first.
well, you bring up a very good point that I think a lot of indie creators, or a lot of people who, it's a lot of people who are starting for the first time, because I think in this world, there's so many, crowdfunding via whether it's Kickstarter or some of the newer platforms out there that are specific to comics. It's made it really easy in some ways to get your work out there, if you do it right. But I do think it a lot it is running a business. You are an entrepreneur on some level, and so
You're
I
selling a
think,
product,
yeah,
bottom
and a
line.
lot of times I think the mindset is not that, like, this is a business and I need to, realistically come up with my budget and really figure out how much I'm going to need. I know a lot of people at this point are like, okay, well, I got to think about my printing costs and shipping, but you're not thinking and paying the creatives who are working on the project. But I think it's a good point. It's like you need to budget all that out, and then you figure out, okay, this is what I need to make this thing work, and it's not just about like whatever the printing costs are going to be. And that is a mindset that I think a lot of people don't necessarily go into it initially with. I think it is important, especially if you're not able to put all the money into it up front. I think that is a really important step. Now, so when it comes to finding an editor, beyond the cost, because I think you're right. I think a lot of times you get what you pay for, unless you get super lucky and you find somebody who's great, who for whatever reason, or they're a friend or whatever. Like you're right. Like you often are going to get what you pay for, in this in any industry, really.
And
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 so,
if you're not getting what you paid for, if you're not paying very much and you're getting a really high quality product, that person is not valuing themselves
yeah,
accurately, and they are not getting what they need. Like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
that's a problem too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I've dealt with that. Like in my most of my career has been in the fitness industry, and I think there's a lot of, I mean, and there's a lot of situations of you'll get people that are not valuing themselves high enough, and then it just becomes very stressful. It's stressful for them, and it's hard. And I think it's just, people
It's
should get
not
paid
sustainable.
what they're worth. Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
yeah. So now, beyond the cost, which, yeah, it's like if you find somebody who's charging $5 a page, something sketchy there. But beyond the cost, what should people look for when they're finding an editor? Let's say first with a developmental editor, and then if they're looking for more like line editing, copywriting, proofreading, like what should somebody be looking out for when they're interviewing and trying to meet people?
So something I always hear is that writers want samples, but I'm a developmental editor. I can't give samples.
Yeah,
It doesn't work that way.
yeah,
I look at the whole thing from a bird's eye view, and I can't do that with one page. It's
yeah.
just not really a thing. So if you're looking at a developmental editor or a project manager, or even an art director, I would say look at the titles that they've worked on and see if you agree.
Mhm.
Like if you read it and you're like, oh wow, this like story is really confusing and doesn't make any sense, or the art direction like I just doesn't, if it's not working for you, find someone else. But it's also, with project management and art direction, you want people who are easy to work with and who are going to be able to wrangle artists to get things in on time,
Yeah.
in a nice way. And figure out, like, is this person a people person? Are they good with the creators that I'm trying to get on board? Like, are they going to be a good team lead, right? So
Yeah.
you're sort of interviewing for like a sort of a manager position in that case, and you want to find someone who is going to make the experience delightful.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. Make sure that the quality that they are producing is good, and make sure that they're easy to work with. And for developmental editing, I do sort of a different process than other editors. That I used to run some developmental editing meetup group things, and we would talk about how we onboarded clients. And I always do a Zoom interview because I want them to see my face and see what I'm like, and make sure that we have like a similar sense of humor, that we have the same ideas and we're on the same page. And I also want to make sure that they don't expect me to email a lot, because I hate email. Like I think it's so much easier to have a conversation where we can like interrupt each other and say, oh no, wait, that is not what I meant. Do not go on a rant for 5 hours on that. Like, let's, check ourselves and talk about, what we actually need to talk about. Because I think so many times in email, it's just like, oh, I'm reading 5 pages of you misinterpreting something I said. And then, then I have to respond, and it's just 80 emails for one simple thing. And it's just so much more efficient, I think, over Zoom. So that's my process. I really prefer that personal touch and having a conversation. And then we can spitball so much easier and figure out the problems without waiting days to get back to each other. And so that's something that I do that is more on the unique side, at least in novel editing. I think it is a little bit more personal. With comics, they're a little bit more social, oddly. But a lot of the developmental editors I've met in the novel space, they're like, oh my God, you talk to people? Like, they do all their edits like on the page. And for me, I think another issue that creates is that a lot of the feedback sounds very bad on the page. It's like, hey, there's a plot hole here. Hey, here's everything that's wrong with your book. Here's 40 pages of everything that's terrible. And it feels really, really bad to read something like that. So I prefer to do it where they can see, no, really, look at my face. I loved the book. It just needs a little ironing here and there. And then we can talk about like 1 to 3 major things that they can focus on throughout that'll solve, have a ripple effect and solve the whole like all of the problems in a way. Because I really think that I've met a lot of editors who their philosophy is, okay, I've received this thing and I need to cut it down by 70%. That is not me. I like that. That's so disrespectful. This person is poured like their life into this book, and my idea is, if it's in the book, maybe it doesn't go there, but it's important somehow. So maybe we can find another place for it, in a different area of the book, or maybe it belongs in a different story or something. But I think it's important to be respectful of the creative process. And so I mean, I think just by talking to the editor, you can kind of figure out, like, is this person's editing philosophy going to work with my goals for the book? Because if you want someone who's going to come in and cut 70% of it, I'm probably not your guy. And if you want someone who is really into, well, for example, on my website, I have a list of things that I'm not into, like poetry in the middle of fantasy books. I can't, it's not my taste. So I'm generally not going to enjoy that. And that means that I'm not the best editor for it. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's not within the realm of my skill set. Right. So I think it's really important to find out, are you guys aligned? Are they going to be the right person for your genre? If someone is saying that they edit all of the genres, they're not specializing. They're not being honest, like,
Now, so then what's the process look like? Let's say, kind of a broad view, like, of, let's say somebody has a comic, it's the first issue of, I don't know, an ongoing series. Let's say they want to write, they're looking for an editor, they meet you, everything works out, you want to start with them. What does that process look like? And how long should they expect it to take, to go through that editing process before getting that book ready?
It depends on the length of the book. If it's just a single issue, that probably usually turnaround is about a week. It's pretty fast. And that's just for the first round of, okay, I've read the script and here's my feedback. The process does depend largely on the other talent as well. You know, if
Yeah.
we're bringing on artists who are, you know, backlogged in their other art that they have to do and things like this, you know, it could take a really long time, but you know, it really depends. But yeah, my developmental editing is typically pretty quick for
Yeah.
short issues. Yeah, if it's more like a oh, brain. um if it's a graphic novel length, if it's a graphic novel length, that'll take a bit more time.
Yeah.
But I also like to have a conversation about, you know, if it is just a single issue, like what's happening after, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
where are we going? Because it can be helpful to have an arc in mind.
Yeah.
You know, how many issues do you want to do?
Yeah.
What's your plan for marketing? What's your plan for moving forward with, you know, crowdfunding or whatever? And you know, if you're doing a crowdfunding model and you're releasing an issue at a time, you have to look at the issue in preparation for the next issue, right?
Yeah.
You have to end in a way that they're going to want the next issue, like stat,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah. Now what as an editor, what are some of the common mistakes that you see from, like, let's say first time comic writers?
um mostly it's with like telling the artist what to do.
Mhm.
You know, they'll be like, okay, I want to have 50 panels on this page. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, or they'll want to have you know, like I mentioned earlier, it's one panel, but this one character is doing three different things in it.
Yeah.
It's not a movie clip. You have
Yeah.
them doing one thing in each panel, you know, still images. And you know, I see people writing really, really elaborate descriptions for very, very detailed artwork sometimes, which is harder. You know,
Yeah.
you gotta, like, if you want your artist to go fast, probably don't do that.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, there's also people who leave it way too much up to the imagination, and the artist is like, I don't know what to draw because there's nothing written, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and
So
I found that that's interesting. Like, because I've been, that's one of the more, well, yeah, one of the more interesting experiences for me, because I'm not an artist. So I think I very often I'm going to I'm, you know, more often than not, if the artist has a suggestion, I'm going to go with that because they're the one with the visual, you know, mind.
mhm.
I may have specific things, or maybe moments where, like, this is the scene I want, you know, like I want this thing and that's that. But I will kind of relent to whatever the artist wants, because often they're the one, again, they have it in mind, with, you know, they have the visuals in mind that I just don't. That's why I'm writing it and not, you know, drawing it as well. But I do find it like there is a weird balance to find between when you're giving too much, you know, detail between, or and not enough. And I've seen both. Like, I've seen some writers who will write down every little detail what they want, and then I've seen writers who just kind of, it's very vague and broad, and leaves it to the artist. I guess, where do you fall on that? So, like, is it like, as far as how much instruction, you know, as a writer, is it more like, you know, structure, flow, dialogue, and then hand it to the artist? Or do you find that it is important to, you know, at some spots, be a little bit more detailed with what they want specifically on the page?
well, okay, so I think on one end of the spectrum we have like a film script, which is
Yeah.
just going to be the words that the characters are saying.
Yeah.
And that is not helpful for an artist.
Yeah.
You know, if they have nothing, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's better to sort of, you know, at least figure out like what each page is going to be. And that is a narrative thought process, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a page, you know, you have two sides of the page in a flat open book, right? So you want to structure that spread in a way that will keep them turning pages, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes you'll have a big splash page where it's just the whole thing is one panel, and that could be really cool. But that's a device, you know, you're using that for the story.
Yeah.
So I think it is the writer's job to decide how many panels are on each page and
Yeah.
how the layout is happening with those things. You know, the artist can come in and say, get a little bit more creative with like, okay, you know, I've got 5 panels, so I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. or maybe they're going to do 1, 2, 3, they're
Yeah.
going to figure out the arrangement maybe, but it is helpful um, for the writer to think about it as a way to pace the story, as a way to get the information across in a way that keeps the reader engaged,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So if you struggle with the visuals a little bit, it could be okay to leave it a little bit loose and be like, okay, if the character's wearing a hat, that's up to the artist, whatever, but 5 panels,
Yeah.
4 panels, and you decide the pacing that way, and I think that's important.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's shift gears a little bit. So talking about, let's say, becoming an editor. For like an aspiring editor, what would you say are some qualifications? And maybe if there's any education necessary for getting in, we'll say specifically for comic editing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what would you say are the qualifications? And whatever what experience is necessary to get into it?
Well, I think with any kind of freelancing business, you need to learn how to run a business and realize that it's not a fast track to making money. Just like publishing, it's like there are going to be so many more people who don't want to buy your book than people who do want to buy your book. And yeah, it's the same thing with editing, or any kind of freelancing, because people, I think they look at the prices and they think, oh, this is a really good way to make money real quick because the hourly rate is awesome. But that's just that's just what the writer is seeing that they're paying for. The rest of the time, it's you're paying for marketing, so you have to make money that'll cover that. You have to make money that'll cover the blog posts that you're putting all over the internet so people can discover that you write book or that you edit books. There's so much work to get clients, to do your taxes, to do paperwork and invoicing and emailing and scheduling and branding and building your website. All of these things there's so much more to the job than just the editing portion. So I think having an understanding of the business and how to charge so that you're charging for all of the things you do rather than just the little part that the person paying you sees.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, I had a few businesses. I've done multiple freelance businesses. So I have a bit of an understanding of how to get one started, how to register with the state, the DBA and all of that jazz. But, as far as the specific to comics editing training, there are a couple of pretty good groups. Are you familiar with Gamal Hennessy's group?
No.
Good resource because he offers a lot of it's good for people who are writing comics as well. It's just general industry information, how-tos, interviews with professionals, and it's a pretty good resource for everything. Yeah, because he changed the name of it. So I think it's Comics Connection, and I can send you the link for that so that you have it easily. But it's a Discord server, and he does events and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's a good place to get started to get to know more about any kind of career in comics, really. There's sections for artists, for writers, for editors, to talk to each other and share resources.
And there's definitely a lot of parallels. Like with personal training, I used to deal with that where like if you look at the hourly rate for trainers, it can be a lot of money. And I can't tell you how many people and friends who like wanted to get into it or got into it because they saw that part, not realizing like there's marketing and there's getting the clients and there's all the free consultations you do with people that aren't going to do it, and it really is like running a business. The taxes
and subscriptions to softwares that you need to do the edit. I mean, because I think when people look at the hourly rate, they're thinking about it from an employed position, right, where you have a boss who gives you the clients and tells you what work to do and where to be when, and there's none of that. So not only do you have to like charge a lot more than feels right sometimes. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my God, this is only going to take me 2 hours and I'm charging $1,000. This is
Yeah.
crazy. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's all the visible work that you're doing this
Yeah.
month. You need to charge for that. And unfortunately, a lot of these things are really not valued across the board. It's not just editors. I mean,
Yeah.
God, the stuff that the artists go through.
Yeah.
I would not. You couldn't pay me enough ever to be a comic book artist. I mean,
Yeah.
they have so many health problems because of how hard they work and
Yeah.
the deadlines and the impossible. Like it is so impossible to do it because there's so many of them too that they're just disposable in the
Yeah.
industry, unfortunately. And if you get carpal tunnel, there you go.
Yeah.
You're just not going to make money while you're healing from that, or you just work through it and make it worse. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really awful.
Yeah, I know it's true. And I think you see the work is devalued so much at times that yeah, it's like unfortunately, it's like you've got to, they're creatives, they're trying to make, they're trying to earn a living, and it sucks to see how rough they have it, and how much the work sometimes is just not valued,
And like
properly.
another thing, with the AI stuff coming in,
Yeah,
people are like, oh, well, I can just do this with software. And it's like,
yeah,
cool, and like for me, I'm obsessed with sci-fi, and I was like,
yeah.
okay, cool. So apocalypse is going to be like we're all slaves to the machines,
Pretty
or
much.
the good end is where no one works and we have hoverboards. But actually, it's like worse because
Yeah,
artists are the ones that don't have jobs now.
yeah,
Like we still have to be cashiers for some reason,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
now you can't get paid for art because machines are making it.
and
What?
that's and that's a whole different discussion, so we won't get too much into it. But one of the worst
Sorry.
things I've seen is when I see people refer to themselves as AI artists, it like drives me bonkers. Like, yes, I get that they're creating prompts and stuff, but like call yourself a prompt creator or whatever, you're not an artist. And I like, it bothers me to no end when I see people refer to themselves as such. And like, I think thankfully it's not at the point where you can really create a good cohesive comic, but it's pretty scary, where it might be down the road. And yeah, it's like just another thing, like kind of knocking artists out of the way.
Well, I mean, and it's also having a ripple effect, because it's sort of in the core of the writing protests in Hollywood right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that shouldn't affect me, but it has. I've lost two
Yeah.
major clients because they are not making money right
Oh,
now
okay.
because they're
Yeah.
writing for Hollywood. They don't have any income, so they can't pay me.
Yeah.
So thank goodness I have other ventures. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. Like don't expect editing to be your main thing.
Yeah.
You know, or your only thing, especially if you're choosing the freelance life, you're doing all kinds of things. I have like 7 jobs.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that's the thing with the freelancer is you really do have to be a hustler and know and not have all your eggs in one basket. So now I guess what if somebody does under accept that, okay, I want to be an editor, I understand the lifestyle, what steps should they take to get into it?
Meet other editors,
Yeah.
learn as much as you can. There's a Facebook group I'll send you. Oh, if I can remember the name of it. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
It's run by Steve Cole,
Mm.
and
Oh yes,
he's
yes, I know that. Yeah, yep. I think that's how I found you on that
oh,
in that in
yeah,
that
you're
group. Yep,
right.
yep, yep.
Yeah, the Comic Book Editors Alliance.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so Steve's just wonderful, and he's
Yeah.
so happy to help people. And there's a bunch of really great people in that group
Yeah.
who are really open to mentoring newbie editors.
Okay,
So,
great. Yeah.
if you can find some connections, there's lots of people who are willing to donate their time
Yeah.
to help guide you in and show you books that will help, and
Yeah.
courses that you can take. But yeah, I think a lot of it is networking and really building a client base. That's going to be the biggest hurdle,
Yeah.
because you're not going to start making money right away,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to start getting experience somehow.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one for a lot of
Yeah.
people because they're like, oh, I'll offer my services for free.
But-
you know
yeah.
the problem though with that is then you have people who will want to come back to you and not pay you,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're just getting started, do try to have a basis for things. You can access old scripts and look at
Yeah.
them and try to figure out, like, okay, what are the problems here, and do some practice on some scripts that have already been, maybe they're the rough draft that then got edited and then turned into a real comic, and you can
Yeah.
like look at that, edit it, and then look at the final page and see, I changed it this way and it's actually the final is this way, and does mine work better, does theirs work better, and kind of think about it that way, so you
Yeah.
can learn about it that way. But yeah, I think if you're offering your services for free, unfortunately that's just going to keep you working for free.
Yeah. And it's kind of the paradox. It is like the paradox of any kind of freelance field, especially when there's not necessarily a formal process to getting into
Like
it. That
apprenticeships or
yeah, exactly. Like you've got to find a way in, and but that is not devaluing yourself, and that's not, but also not kind of overextending or over committing to something, that like you're not trying to take a massive job that pays a lot of money, because you probably are not ready for that, and there's like some baby steps involved. So I think it is a bit of a challenge, but that you'll find that with any freelance type of work.
I think there's way more danger in undervaluing. If there's a job that's high paying, they're gonna know that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know,
That's fair. Yeah, fair.
so you're pretty safe from that. But what will overextend you is if you lowball,
Yeah.
and then you have a whole bunch of work that isn't paying for your food.
Yeah,
You know,
that makes sense.
because if you're not making enough money to eat, you're not going to have the brain energy to do all the work that you have to do.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So okay, so a couple more questions. I ask everybody. So we're kind of putting together a library of the show. So every time I interview somebody, I ask for one or two of your favorite books. Like if you were going to add, okay, this is the library, we're adding to the show. What are the two books that we need to put, include on our library here?
Okay, and are these only comic books?
I'll tell you what. You can give me two comic books and one. If you want to do a novel too, that's fine too. I'll take that too.
Okay. I have a page on my website that
Okay.
is all of my favorite books.
Okay, nice.
So okay. I mean, I am a diehard Garth Ennis fan.
Yeah.
So if Garth Ennis isn't already up there,
Not yet.
um,
Nobody's added him
what?
no. What? To be fair,
Blasphemy!
I've only had a few interviews for
Okay.
as part of the series, but yeah, no, we have not had Garth Ennis added yet. But yeah. So what would your choice be?
Oh God. Okay. That's really hard because everything is so good. I was like, oh, surely there's Preacher on there, so I can't say Preacher, but like, what? Okay, so Preacher obviously is, it's my favorite. It's really good. I also really love Chronicles of Wormwood. Um, The Boys. The Crossed is crazy. Oh my God. Um, yeah, okay, just Garth Ennis in general. Just put him
Okay.
down as a must-read author.
Okay, got it.
Let's see. Okay, so for art, my favorite artist is David Mack,
Okay.
and I think you really can't beat the beauty of Kabuki.
Okay.
He did a couple of really beautiful runs on Daredevil as well. I mean, God,
Yeah.
just David Mack is his process is so cool. He does half digital, half real world. He'll like
Okay.
do stuff digitally, print it out, paint over it, scan it, put it back in the computer, and go back and forth like that. And it's just
Yeah.
this beautiful, like collagey, watercolory, just ugh. It's like food.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So we'll add those. Neither of those have been added to our list yet. So great.
Perfect.
And then what would you say for who's best favorite writer? So if we're talking prose. Or not
Um,
writer, but maybe if is it what stands out to you? What's your favorite?
Okay, favorite comic writer is Garth Ennis. Favorite writers, okay, I'm just gonna Douglas Adams, Terry Pratchett, Jason Pargin,
Mhm.
um, Neil Gaiman, uh, Oscar Wilde,
Okay. Awesome.
Haruki Murakami.
All right, so you've added definitely more to our list than anybody. So that's
I
great. This
just
is awesome.
I love
Yeah,
I'm constantly reading, like even when I'm not editing, I
yeah.
have audiobook
So
playing
yeah, so
all the
actually
time.
and that's another another question. So do you find it hard to consume stuff as you're as a creative, or if you or do you just you carve out the time to do it and that's that?
I
Like,
don't
is it
even carve out the time. I'm literally always doing, like,
okay?
my sport is walking, and I'll, if something is like an hour away or less, I'm walking there.
Yeah.
And otherwise I'm just like, if I'm in transit, I'm listening to an audiobook. If I'm
Yeah.
puttering around the house, I'm listening to an audio. I'm constantly listening to
Yeah.
audiobooks, and I listen to them at double speed, and
Okay. Oh
I
wow.
consume
Yeah.
audiobooks. I
It's
have I have a library app, so it's
yeah.
free, and I just
So that's funny. I listen to podcasts at 1.5 speed. I have audiobooks and I think it's like 1.3. I think anything more than that and it's a little hard for me
really,
to
I
get through
can't
it. Yeah.
stand how slowly they're.
Yeah. Speaking of, so actually quick question on audiobooks. Do you have a favorite narrator for audiobooks?
I love Neil Gaiman, reads his own
Yes.
stuff, and it's
He's great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't stand how slowly he reads. I
Okay.
wish it could go faster than double speed.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think he does a really good performance of his own work, and it is really nice to listen to. But yeah, I think I don't I could never at single speed. I
Yeah.
could never.
Yeah, I wish
Um,
I could get into doing it at more than that. It's so hard. Well, Alice, it's been great having you on the show. So where can people find you? Your website,
so
email,
my
work. Yeah.
yeah, my website is theimpofediting.com.
Okay, great.
And that's pretty straightforward. I am working on a podcast or two.
Okay, yeah. And what are those? And we'll definitely include links as well to those in the notes.
So I haven't released any episodes yet. They're
Okay.
still being edited, but one of them is called Pay Me to Stop, and
Okay.
it's just a talk show, and it's about everything and anything and whatever.
Okay.
The other one is You Gonna Write That? And it's me and my best friend making up really stupid stories,
Oh
just to
wow.
entertain each other. And it's sort of like we're just like going through a brainstorming process. Like throughout the week, we send each
Yeah.
other memes, and those are the kernels for ideas.
Okay.
We just like look at the memes and we're like, oh, this gives me an idea for this kind of story, and then we
Yeah.
launch into it, and they become really stupid really fast.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we're like, so you're gonna write that? And it's usually no for me because I'm too busy. But we also invite the listener to maybe riff on our crazy, stupid ideas.
Oh, that's amazing. Is that one out currently?
No, but obviously I'm really excited about it.
Yeah,
But
that no,
we've been like making the episodes. We just started that a couple weeks ago, so
oh,
we're
that
we're
sounds
about.
amazing. That's something that sounds I would listen to. So definitely when it's out, just let me know because I'd love to hear something like that. That sounds really that sounds really cool. And I think
Yeah, it's
it helps with to me as somebody who is trying to be creative. I think that's a really cool way to help with the creative process.
mm, yeah, definitely. I mean, we talk sometimes about like where to source ideas, and things like that, because I do a bit of creative coaching as well for people
Yeah,
who, they're like, I have a story, I just don't know what to do, and
yeah.
they need a little bit of help. And I work with a lot of neurodivergent authors, and
Okay.
so we sometimes strategies are in order to
Yeah.
to make it work. So yeah. Um,
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
yeah, thanks so much for having me. I had a great time.
Thanks. Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, leave a review. We can be found on all social media platforms at portable_whole. We can be found on all podcast platforms at Portable Whole Publishing. We can be found on the web at portablewholepublishing.com. And you can email us at portablewholepub@gmail.com.